We flew South African Airways via Johannesburg to Livingstone in Zambia, where we stayed one night at the Zambezi Sun Hotel. The hotel, which is right on Victoria Falls, is in the style of a walled African village. The rainbow there is caused by the spray from the falls. The hotel is within the national park and has its own groups of zebra and giraffe within the hotel grounds. Late afternoon, and we board the African Queen, no less, for a sunset cruise on the mighty Zambezi River. We get to see some wildlife on the cruise, including these white-fronted bee-eaters and whatever this is. And a hippo. We're not the only cruise boat heading for the sunset. Next morning, and a short walk to the top of Victoria Falls.
But God was so generous because He shared the waters. He didn't want Zambians to benefit from the river itself. He shared the waters. He first took the water into Angola. The river flows entirely in Angola.
The local African name for the falls is Mozi Otunya, the smoke that thunders. Victoria Falls Bridge, completed in 1905, links Zambia on the left with Zimbabwe on the right, and David Livingstone still overlooks the scene. Then it's off to the heliport for our helicopter trip over the falls. That afternoon we start our journey to Botswana by minibus to Kazungula. At this chaotic ferry port, we and our luggage are loaded into chartered boats. Just upstream of here, where the Chobe River enters the Zambezi, the borders of 4 countries come together at a single point: Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe and Namibia. This is the only place on earth where that happens. Soon we're checking in to the Moana Safari Lodge in Kasane near Chobe National Park for a 3-night stay. Sunset over the Chobe River. Our first game drive starts before dawn next morning, and almost immediately we see our first lioness. As it turned out, our only lion. These evil-looking birds are marabou storks, which, unusually for storks, eat carrion. These are impala, and you seem to see more of them than practically anything else in the game park. This is a warthog. And a baboon. These are guinea fowl. Partway through the drive, we get a short break down by the river. It's the only place you're allowed to get out of the vehicle. After a couple of hours rest and lunch back at the hotel, we're off on a river safari in the afternoon. These are vervet monkeys, and this is an African fish eagle. a monitor lizard. Bee eaters. Water buffalo.
Now more hippopotami began to convene on the banks of that river so wide. I wonder now what am I to say of the scene that ensued by the Shalimar's side. They dived all at once with an ear-splitting splash, then rose to the surface again. A regular army of hippopotami, all singing this haunting refrain. Mud, mud, glorious mud, nothing quite like it for cooling the blood. So follow me, follow, down to the hollow, and there let us wallow in glorious mud. Glorious mud, 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 glorious mud, 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 glorious mud. Nothing quite like it for cooling the blood. So follow me, follow, down to the hollow, and there let us wallow in glorious mud.
The baby hippo was only about a week old, we were told. As the sun sets, it's time for us to go back to the hotel. And in the morning, we've opted to do a river safari on a smaller boat. These creatures are mongooses. A snake bird drying its wings. Our guide Lungu found us this leopardess sleeping in the shade. He reckons she's pregnant and comes here most days to escape the heat.
Uma bengahlangana angaphatheka kabusathane. Uma bengahlangana angaphatheka kabusathane. uNkulunkulu bekile amandla akhe kula madoda, 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 kula madoda. Beno uma bengahlangana angaphatheka kabusathane. Beno uma bengahlangana angaphatheka kabusathane. uNkulunkulu bekile amandla akhe. uNkulunkulu wami ngikuswile uma khuluma nami. uNkulunkulu wami ngikuswile, uNkulunkulu wami ngikuswile, uNkulunkulu wami ngikuswile, uNkulunkulu wami ngikuswile.
After lunch, it's back into the park by land, and this is a lilac-breasted roller. Water buffalo coming down to drink at the water hole.
Beno uma bengahlangana angaphatheka kabusathane. Beno
Hammer cop stork. Sable antelope. Kudu. a dung beetle performing its vital function. Time for our riverside break, and this time we have a visitor. And just as the sun is fading, we're treated to a pack of African wild dogs. The next day, it's a long day travelling to Cape Town, starting with the familiar chaos at the Kasane-Kuzungulu crossing. At least one of the trucks that was waiting here 3 days previously was just getting onto the ferry. Although we arrived in good time at Livingstone Airport, and so did our plane, it didn't leave on time, so we missed our connection at Johannesburg, and we didn't arrive to the hotel in Cape Town until very late that evening. In the morning, we have our tour of Cape Peninsula, starting with Hout Bay and then Cape Point. Down there is the Cape of Good Hope itself, where we're going next for our photo opportunity, along with lots of other people. Next, it's the penguin colony at Boulders Beach near Simonstown. These are African penguins, which are closely related to Magellanic and Galapagos penguins.
It did not take no long time, then I saw myself everywhere to fly.
The Zamani brothers entertain us on the way out. We stopped for lunch in Simonstown. Next morning, our first stop is Victor Verster Prison, which is the prison Nelson Mandela was ultimately released from. Franschhoek, meaning French Corner, is a town founded by Huguenot refugees from France. It's a centre for exploring the wine region and is noted for its fine restaurants. Not far away is Botswana Wine Estate. This land was at one time owned by Cecil Rhodes. One room full of barrels looks much the same as another. This is the wine library, which contains samples of bottles from every vintage. And now it's time for the tasting, but we didn't really think any of the wines were particularly worth bothering with. After lunch, we visit Stellenbosch, the second oldest European settlement in South Africa. It was founded in 1679 by Simon van der Stel, who was the governor of the Dutch Cape Colony. It's a major university town and a centre for the wine industry. Late afternoon, and we're at Table Mountain because we've heard that the cable car is running. We're at the lower station, and up there is the upper station. The floor of the car revolves, so that, in principle, everybody gets all of the view some of the time. And when we get to the top, what happens? The clouds start to come in again. Next morning we start at the District 6 Museum. District 6 was an area of Cape Town that was declared whites only by the apartheid government in the 1960s, and the majority of the population, who were not white, were forcibly removed, and almost all the buildings, apart from religious buildings, were bulldozed.
Before they even come and visit this country, they just see me from their cousins who came earlier on here and say, hey, we've been in Cape Town.
Then it's on to Langer Township and a visit to the Shebeen.
Okay. Ah, lovely.
Mamma mia! Please send some of the pictures to the office.
Then I'm fired because I'm drinking it at work.
Originally, only migrant male workers were allowed to live in the township. Later on, families were allowed to join, and the population grew.
6 bedrooms. So down that side you have 3 bedrooms. Down this side you have another 3 bedrooms. In each bedroom you find 3 concrete beds. So 3 strangers share their room, yeah? That meant 18 people at the end of the day.
Work on renovating the blocks stopped when funds were diverted to pay for the World Cup infrastructure. The children at Dalukanyu Preschool singing their national anthem in 3 languages. The shantytown element of the township sprang up because of a population explosion. There was an influx of migration from the countryside as well as illegal immigration from the likes of Zimbabwe. For lunch we headed to the V&A waterfront in central Cape Town. Lots of shops and restaurants and bars. We spend our last morning at Spear, which, as well as being a winery, runs several wildlife encounter experiences.
I've been hurt by most eagles here, and the one that's hurt me the most is the female mark. When we fly the eagles on site, I fly on the line, and it's because of the safety aspect. A lot of these hand.
It's possible to have a personal encounter with the cheetahs up close, but we chose not to. All the cheetahs here have been orphaned in the wild, and they're not allowed to breed because they couldn't be let back out into the wild. They wouldn't be able to fend for themselves. The unusual markings of the king cheetah are due to a genetic deformity. They wouldn't survive in the wild with these markings because they're no good for camouflage. Time to head back to the hotel, pick up the luggage and head off for the airport for the long flight home via Johannesburg.